We've been very much known as the bureau company. There's a huge amount more to it. It's innovation, particularly with AI. Fraudsters are becoming far more sophisticated, in terms of the types of attacks that are now coming in. You've got this probabilistic world of AI and this deterministic world of rules. There's a world in the future where you just set the outcome you want. We had a big event where we sort of announced what the shape of that world will be. It's been really resonating with our clients. We always pull the best of the knowledge of our customers and our clients, the knowledge that Experian brings and all the SME with our platform, bringing those together to help our customers navigate this new world that's happening very fast.
This is Connected with Experian, the podcast where data, tech and human insight come together to power smarter decisions. I'm Waseem Mirza, and in this series we're speaking to the people building what's next across financial services and beyond, exploring how connected data is driving trust, innovation and real-world impact. Well, today I'm joined by Keith Little to explore the shift into what many are calling the Agentic age, where AI is no longer just supporting decisions, but increasingly making them, and what it takes to do that in a way that is trusted, auditable and scalable. So Keith, thank you very much for joining us here on Connected with Experian. How would you describe your role on a day-to-day basis?
Me and my team look after all the global software and platforms for Experian worldwide. So we, day-to-day, we build products for our clients based on our client needs, and those are distributed to our clients across the globe on our platforms, which our regional teams use to build great solutions for our customers.
You've got a very wide remit. Just home in on that for us, because it stretches across analytics and much more.
We've got a big breadth of capabilities in Experian, so everything from analytics, credit, fraud, marketing, the whole sort of breadth, obviously underpinned by AI and all the good stuff and technologies and platforms that deliver it.
And you personally have got a very wide view, if you like, of the way that these modern financial systems operate. How did you end up specializing in this particular area?
One of the fascinating things of the space that we got and the breadth that we got is I get to spend, and my team get to spend a huge amount of time with clients, but not just in one area, but across the globe. So whether we're talking to US clients, European, UK, Australia, Brazil, the whole lot. So we see how the, say, banking systems in the areas we look at, we get lots of feedback, see directions, lots of common themes, lots of localized pieces, but a lot of common themes. And it gives us a unique view as to where things are going and trends. And, listening to our clients is so important to help shape our products.
When you think about Experian, we've got a very outdated view. Just explain for us how that's now shifting into a new era.
Yeah. So, as I say, we've been very much known as the bureau company. The data, or you speak to people and they obviously know about the app and the credit scores and everything else that obviously drives a lot of what people think of Experian. But there's a huge amount more to it. The amount of activity going on around its software, its innovation, AI, its analytics capabilities. And how now we're much more on the forefront of what's going on in terms of, particularly with AI, which obviously we'll talk a lot more about, and how we're sort of bringing that to address our client needs and work with our customers on that.
And for you, on a personal level, how have you found this shift gathering pace with the advent of AI?
My journey at Experian has been fascinating. Again, as being a customer, what's actually been great is to see the breadth of tools and capabilities that Experian has had beyond the data. And then when you bring all of those tools and the data together, you get sort of, magic can happen, and particularly in terms of the products that we produce and how that, to address our client needs.
So give us a sense of that magic then. What could you do now that you couldn't do before?
So, if I think about, particularly in the world, let's just talk about simple credit applications. You think about, you apply for a loan or a credit card or something like that. You think of all the things that you need to make happen in those few seconds to see if you get an approved loan or whatever it is. You've got to stitch together, obviously, data. You've got to have, data on the bureau type data that we're traditionally known, but there's, identity, there's analytics, there's policies and strategies and AI within those rules that have to happen within a few seconds. That brings together loads of capabilities. And again, Experian has all of that can bring that, all together. And, to your previous point, AI is just accelerating that change and adds another layer of opportunity to what we've been doing for us and our clients.
So with opportunity, as you call it, there comes a point where you need to address challenges as well. What are you doing to ensure that future transition is safe?
Clearly, in this world of AI, there's obviously huge amounts of press and noise and hype and reality and everything else. One of the things that anchor points, particularly for Experian, is the trust word. We use the trust word all the time. We have trusted data. We have data that is regulated, that has all the controls around it that you'd expect. And in this bizarre world of AI, the amount of synthetic data out there, the amount of sort of, the phrase slop you can get heard of, trusted data will become scarce. And, then, people like ourselves become, hugely critical in that world. So how can we help our clients navigate that world in that safe, regulated space where we typically work is hugely important. And that's where bringing our sort of software and our data together is a really important sort of strategy, and something that me and my team are spending huge amounts of time thinking about.
That's interesting. I will come to the point about security and issues like fraud later on. But for now, let's move on to the agentic AI buzzword. A bit of a buzzword right now in the industry. Just explain for us what that means to you.
So, yeah, as you say, sort of a natural evolution of the sort of AI piece. And AI it's a funny term, isn't it? It's AI has been around for a long time, many, many years. Obviously, we've gone through those phases. Experian has got some huge experience in AI from past, and obviously generative AI now has become the sort of the thing of the last few years, and now agents have sort of launched into it, and it's all about maturity and everything else. But what's really powerful about the agentic piece, it brings this sort of intelligence level. One nice analogy is that the data that we have is the knowledge, but AI can blend, and agentic AI specifically can bring the intelligence, and you bring those things together. So it's all about thinking about that journey and how that sort of those two worlds meet in a very safe and trustworthy way, and how we can help our clients really benefit from that.
So thinking and taking action based on the data presented to us, and allowing machines to do all that for us. On one level, that's a scary thought, and on another, huge opportunity there.
You've got this probabilistic world of AI and this deterministic world of rules. So, if you ask ChatGPT 1,000 times to add 2 + 2, it's not always going to give you 4, right? So, there's that sort of thing. And what's fascinating is how we can bridge those two worlds. We want to get the opportunity that AI and agents and the agentic world brings, but with that deterministic, trust, regulated, safe space of what we do, particularly emphasized in a regulated world.
All right. So give me an example, if you will, of agentic AI working in an optimal way.
Yeah, so if you play to the strengths of what AI is really good through, and therefore agents are good at. So if set up in the right way, are fantastic in terms of looking at, fragmented systems, data and signals. You mentioned fraud earlier. It's fantastic at looking through signals, through noise, to come up with suggestions, but doing that continually 24/7 and all of that type of thing. So if you think of a fraud caseworker who has to, there's some fraudulent activity that's happened on somebody's account. It's created a case that they need to look at because they're not sure if it's fraud or not. AI and agents and the agentic side can sift through masses of disconnected data, fragmented data signals, and look and give suggestions and be very clear at explaining those suggestions to that caseworker to speed up their lives. We've got some agentic agents working in those sort of fraud case type areas, and the time to work a case, the speed, the productivity gains have been huge. Really, I mean, it's really exciting. And having, in previous lives, running those sorts of areas and understanding those worlds, what we can now do with agents, playing to the strengths of AI, using agents is critical, but always with the human in the loop. But it just speeds up the time. It's really exciting.
So I just want to pose an example of my own. I was the victim of fraud last summer whilst on holiday abroad, and I realised that my bank cards were literally frozen due to this suspicious activity, which was all legitimate. It was all my own expenditure. But the system, my bank, already knew that I was travelling abroad because I already purchased the whole package through them directly. Would Agentic AI have helped in that situation?
Well, if they'd have linked up the fragmented systems, exactly the point. And it's so much easier. There's a term, particularly in or many sort of case working type environments, whether it's credit fraud, of chair swiveling, because often you see when you go on the floors where there's hundreds of people working these cases. I was talking actually to a bank. A very large bank earlier this week. They've got to look at 17 different systems, and they talk it's chair swiveling to move around all of the screens to look through. And for a human being to do that continually, that is not efficient. And this is where agents can speed up those processes and join the dots, as it were, and would know that you're on holiday and all of those types of things. But also make this is another thing where with that productivity gains, the teams can focus on more, let's call it high value tasks. So in your example, focusing on genuine decline rates, GDR they call it. So this is where, if you're trying to fight fraud, it's spotting the bad people, not the good people, and upsetting the good people like yourself, completely, and balancing and focusing on what more can we do to improve that experience, because it's not a good customer experience.
If I'm running a lender or a bank, say, what are the first signs that I'm crossing from AI supporting my people into AI taking actions on behalf of customers and, of course, the wider business?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. On the lender side, what are the focus areas? We've touched on a few of them. Fragmented systems, there's lots of manual activities in underwriting on certain types of loans and where things are referred. So there's a huge productivity gains to be met across, trying to be far more efficient. But I think more and more, certainly the conversations I'm having, productivity sort of, not say a given, because people are still experimenting a lot with this, particularly on the agent side. Lots of them have got AI and using AI in their day-to-day, but the agentic stuff is fairly new. But it's the performance side as well. So what AI is really good at is not only, cutting through all the manual tasks and all of that perspective, but is always hunting for insights to drive better performance. So how do you optimize your strategy, your lending strategies based on sort of like I say, it can just continually work 24/7 in terms of analyzing data to find out where anomalies are and whatever else there is. And where with Experian, because we have such a breadth of knowledge and data across the ecosystems in the regions we operate, we've got a pretty unique position in terms of what those agents can see and get those insights for our customers to sort of tune and change and optimize their performance.
And in terms of the fraud aspect, we seem to be on an ever increasing upward trajectory with that. What's behind that, do you think? I mean, is it better reporting? Is it a better holistic view thanks to AI? What's driving that?
Well, obviously the bad people, the fraudsters, are leveraging AI, so advanced. You see in the news all the different types of attacks are phenomenal. Everything from falsifying videos and all these types of things in terms of on the image side. So fraudsters are becoming far more sophisticated in terms of the types of attacks that are now coming in. So therefore the defenses are weak if you're continually in maybe the traditional rules-based approaches to fraud aren't necessarily the best sort of defense to that. And so that's where the focus on the obviously on the customer side or the client side, how you defend against that fraud, and using the AI tools to enable that, particularly, as I said, through much more analysis around the signals and the noise. And it's AI is so good for looking at that, because in a sense, a lot of fraud stuff leans towards the probabilistic side of the world, which is what AI is great at, versus the deterministic. And fraud, for probably the last 7 or 8 years, has been going through this transition using AI more and more in I say the traditional machine learning sense, to give more steer and guidance to the fraud teams in customers. But now, generative AI, its ability to analyze quickly, and now with agents, it's just amplifying that and will help defend against the fraudsters.
Why do you think yesterday's, or even today's in many cases, approaches and systems are struggling to keep up, especially in this always-on connected world?
I think it's volume. Volume of attacks is always increasing. That's continual.
Is it foundational, though? Is the problem about the systems that have been deployed already? They're just not fit for purpose anymore.
Yeah, and it's the legacy. They don't operate as fast. The ability to, change those defenses, change the rules could take, maybe sometimes hours to get into production. Where in that particular gap, you can lose a lot of money, and it's a continual fight. It's just getting faster and faster, and that's where much more automation and agentic and that trust. I mean, there is still obviously regulation. There is still care of our customers, driven by all the reasons of their own various areas, wherever we're operating. That's always got to be in the mind of the fraud person. But it's still, the speed of change, and legacy systems just can't cope with that.
I'll come on to a possible antidote for the future on that topic in a moment. But first, if you will, walk me through a typical decision flow in the traditional or old setup versus this new model that we're in now. And what are the blind spots that you see after adding agents into this mix?
Yeah, so the traditional flow, you apply for a loan or a card or a mortgage, etc. You've got to go through a series of steps. Identity checks, pull your bureau data, take that data, do some analysis, rules, policies, your lending strategies, all of these types of things. Deeper fraud checks, if it passes through all that, it's a workflow. And the outcome is simple as accept, decline, refer. That's as simple as it do. And it's got to do that all in a few seconds. Otherwise the client gets bored and moves on to the other thing. So the world's been going through a huge amount of automation and digitization over the last sort of 10 years. But now with AI and agents, of course, they are outcome based. So there's a world in the future where you just set the outcome you want. You accept we want a 70% accept rate, a 10% decline rate, and whatever the balance is, 30% refer rate, or whatever the outcomes you want. And agents can then continually take those data sources. It can pull all those pieces together, not through a structured workflow, but be much more adaptive to how that outcome is achieved. Now, that's a little bit of a world away, but we're starting to experiment with that. There's still human in the loop, and that will be important. And I think that will be important for a while, because it's got to build up trust. But also, you've got to think of, our clients have got huge regulatory requirements on them. Affordability. They've got to be affordability. The decisions have to be repeatable. So the fact it gives you a loan, now, and then you do it again and it doesn't. Why is that? It should be repeatable, because what's changed? All of that type of thing. So there's all sorts of dynamics that will play into that. But in that lending example, think about how agents could drive a much more efficiency and better outcomes, be more personalized to you as opposed to more generalistic, more adaptive in terms of the lending strategies, because there's all other factors that we can bring more data sources into that world as well.
So in terms of that personalization, with your future hat on, if you wouldn't mind, can you foresee a future where, when I want to renew my mortgage or apply for a loan, I can just hit one button and the system knows, because it's already connected with other agents and it already knows everything else it needs to know for the application without asking me?
That's exactly certainly the future that people aspire to, and our clients certainly aspire to. Now, there's going to be some checks and balances in there, but that's a world that you can now see, where before this agentic world, you'd be looking at going, that's going to, you can theoretically get there, but now you can actually see the sort of light at the end of the tunnel, I would say, is probably the reality of it, because it's playing to those strengths of that intelligence, that ability to bring fragmented things together much, much more efficiently than we've ever done, and is a great bridge from that legacy world to that future world.
Really? Do you think that that's just a matter of a few years away?
There's a huge demand from our clients about alternative data sources to be brought into the lending lifecycle. So it used to be just your credit score. That's no longer the case. It's multiple data points, but now you can go to even wider data points in terms of doing that. However, at its core, it still needs to be auditable. You still need to prove to the regulators why you lent. And there's also a risk part as well. Of course, people don't want bad loans, so your risk and outcomes and things like that. But this is where that continuous world of lending agents, thinking about all those data sources, losses versus fraud as well. And, we're talking about, people have traditionally talked about credit and fraud as separate things, but they're very interdependent, and it's very easy. You could lend to everyone, but you'll make a lot of loss, but you can open up the gates, but you can lose a lot of fraud. You can fix fraud by not accepting anyone. So there's this balancing act. And that balancing act is a really interesting area that agents will certainly start to flush out, I think.
And one of the ways in which you can help is with the so-called Agentic operating system. What exactly is that? It's not another Windows or Mac OS,
yes,
is
true,
it?
Yeah, the start button. No. So we talk a little bit about how our platform, which is called Ascend, needs to change, because obviously one of the things we need to do is obviously make sure that we're always adapting, we're always looking at the future. And one of those key pieces is looking at our platform, think of it more as an agent operating system. So how can we best manage agents? Again, from some of the conversations, the points I've been making around how do we balance that trust element, so bringing all of that security, that regulation, the policy controls, all the guardrails you need to operate safely in a world with the agentic world. And so we're blending these two together through all sorts of technologies of like semantic layers into data and MCP servers and sub agents and orchestration agents and things like that. So that's the sort of world that we've now adapting our platform to go forward in.
On a deeper level, what problem is that OS actually solving?
So one of the interesting things with AI is people, I've talked a lot about it's great unstructured data, but when you're talking in a regulated way, data quality becomes a huge sort of factor in getting the right outcome. And so particularly, we've got very accurate data. We've got these sort of regulatory limits where 99.9% of our bureau data has to be accurate at all times. That's a regulated thing that we have to aspire to. So we've got this amazing quality of data. But how do then we sort of make sure that interacts in the right way with the AI and the agents that need those resources to do whatever they're trying to do? And so when you look at these things, there's a thing called semantic layers, which is sort of translating the underlying data into something that's more human readable. And when I say human readable, also agentic and AI readable to make better decisions. And these little subtleties are really important. And that's where the heart of that foundational elements that we need to put in place, which we're in the process of building. And a lot of it we've built. There's a semantic piece. There's the all the MCP type servers and technologies to access that data in a safe sort of policy controlled way.
You say safe. How critical is it for businesses to be thinking about using an OS for the agentic AI systems in place?
It's hugely important in many of the, obviously for our clients, financial services, it's critical to the regulatory piece. Now, regulation will move on and we'll adapt with regulation, but in some senses, AI is probably going to drive more regulation in terms of, however you foresee the regulatory side. So that is, security is always our number one at Experian. That's where that part starts. And then maintaining that trust is hugely important to us.
And how do you go about making the OS safer? People may remember only a few months ago, there was an incident where two AIs were battling out amongst each other, and then they started to talk to one another in ways that humans couldn't even understand. How do you battle against a scenario like that when it comes to the financial service world?
So firstly, we're in a B2B sense, so we're not necessarily, so it's not like a consumer driven, so that the control of how we think about how agents and the flows and the resources that are allowed. But it's the strictness of the guardrails that go on around, within our agentic operating system, as it were, that can control the policies and what those things do. So if you think about, how you set up the skills and the context of how agents operate, you can put in very, very strict guardrails on that, and then also have overseer agents and critic agents and all sorts of other controls that are sort of building through. Plus, you can get some quite low level, in terms of how you look at that stuff. The key thing with us, though, and back to the semantic layer and that safety, is that we'll never expose our raw data, our core data, our really private data to our agents. It's always derived data as well as all those guardrails. So it's not about, people immediately think, oh, you're going to give all your bureau data or all this sensitive data we have to the LLMs of this world. We're certainly not. Look, facts. We obviously partner with many of all the big names that you're familiar with on the LLM side. A, they don't want to be regulated, but B, they know that they need those systems of record, the safe places. They know that that's not where they play. They've got, other goals in mind of what they want to grow.
All right. So when we're talking about the operating system in the agentic space, what is it that Experian is currently doing in this space that's new and transformative?
It has all this amazing data, trusted, safe, secure, but it also has this great breadth of software, always has. Bringing those two things together in our SEM platform, and now it gives us that unique position to really effectively build this sort of agentic operating system, as we call it, and how we can bring that agentic world to life for our clients, because we have both sides. We have software and data. We can, and that just helps our clients on that journey that they're going through in terms of how agents and AI are affecting their businesses. There's learning on both sides, and we can learn together in the sort of the way we work in terms of collaborative and working with all their lending areas, their tech teams, partnering also with the big LLM and AI providers. So we always pull the best of the knowledge of our customers and our clients, the knowledge of the LLM providers, the knowledge that Experian brings, and all the SME with our platform, bringing those together to help our customers navigate this new world that's happening very, very fast.
Very fast, and a lot of new knowledge. How do you keep on top of that? Is it an insurmountable challenge?
I think so for all of us. I mean, everyone's working at a pace that I've never seen. I've been around a bit in terms of my career, and I've never seen the change happen as fast as this. But again, that's why partnering is so important. You can't sit in a silo and think you know everything. You've got to sort of build that sort of more ecosystem knowledge by spending time with the clients who are learning. They get lots of great insights, and obviously with the big providers, the AI providers as well as our own knowledge about how this world works, and bringing all that to get the best outcomes.
So talk me through what organizations need to be doing now to be ready for this shift in agentic AI.
Yeah, so they need to be thinking about how they're going to change, but their operating model is going to change, because typically, there's a lot of fragmentation in their systems and the tools. There's a lot of fragmentation in data, quality of data, all of these types of things. So, it's how when we partner with our customers, we spend a lot of time looking, when we've been talking about what are the areas to focus on. So everyone's focusing on everything. Probably prioritization is a big one. How they're thinking about their own data that is obviously brought into the machine, as it were, and then really focus on those core use cases where you can really make a difference, whether it's in credit analyst type work, fraud analysts, case working, and things like that. And then bringing ourselves, partnering with us in terms of bringing our sort of data, and because we obsess about data quality and the various things I've talked about around semantic layers and things like that, to bring that to the fore to really help people on that transformation journey they're on.
But we're not starting from a blank page, are we?
No.
Really, there's so many layered systems over risk, etc. But it's not exactly a clean canvas, though, is it?
And that's always in large enterprises, so the legacy they have. And one thing that AI and agents are so good at is actually helping sort of mask some of that, which you've never been able to do in the past. Now, you've got to be very careful about how that masking goes approached. It can smooth that journey, though. So, often architectures work in different sort of speeds. And so often, banks have been going through the sort of legacy work that can take many years, moving things into the cloud and all that, which banks have been underway for, many, many years, but a lot not complete. Agents can sort of help sort of optimize that and still, clients can still take advantage of those agentic worlds, maybe not as effectively from day one, but it certainly takes them on that journey for their customers to get to it.
If you could just drill down to the basics of how this agentic AI systems work, and how does it work in practice on a very simple level?
The simplistic puzzle is, how do we balance the world of probabilistic, which is the AI world, versus the deterministic, which is sort of the world that we've been in for many years. And what this agentic operating system allows is that interface between those two worlds, to do that in a safe, secure way. It allows all the guardrails, security and protection of our data, balanced with then allowing our customers' agents or our own agents to interact in a safe and secure manner.
So that leads me on to our quick fire round of questions. First of all, question 1, AI in lending, more jobs, fewer jobs, or different jobs altogether? Your quick, short take.
Different jobs.
The one buzzword that you would retire happily today.
Oh my God, there are so many. Agentification always is a painful one. I'm not sure if that's a real word. I keep writing it, and but yes, agentic's okay. Agentification, I'm not so sure.
Okay, agentification. Question 3, the most overhyped idea in the AI space right now.
It's less of an idea. It's more that everyone's going to lose their jobs.
The last question, the most underrated but quietly powerful use case.
Search.
Okay. So, Keith, absolutely fascinating to be talking with you about the future direction of the financial service industry when it comes to AI and agentic AI. Thank you so very much.
Great. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Connected with Experian. If you found it useful, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes. You'll find all the links to further resources and Experian's latest thinking on data, AI and decisioning in the show notes and the description below. I'm Waseem Mirza. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time here on Connected with Experian.